It is the festive season, but some families, unfortunately, will be having a glooming one. And alarmingly, only halfway through the summer traditional initiation season, the death toll has already risen so dramatically that the Eastern Cape government believes that the National Prosecuting Authority, the NPA, must investigate the 21 deaths of boys who died during this initiation period. Now, according to the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, or Cogta, the deaths occurred in the Eastern Cape, Western Cape and the Northwest Province, respectively. And Cogta has also said that some of the deaths, 7 we understand, allegedly died through dehydration, 2 from sepsis, 1 initiate allegedly died through suicide, and another was burned to death while sleeping. And during the traditional winter initiation season in June this year, it was reported that 19 boys had died across the country. And joining us now, Obed Bapela, who is the Deputy Minister of Cogta, as well as Zolani Mkiva from the Congress of Traditional Leaders of South Africa, or Contesa. Gentlemen, thanks so much for coming through.
Thank you very much.
I think, the entire nation is probably shocked if we think about the sort of progress that has been made, the initiatives that government has come up with to try and curb these deaths during initiation season. We saw 19 too many during the winter initiation season, Deputy Minister, but now 21 in the summer season. Are you shocked by this?
Well, we regret to announce this figure, Sakina, and it's now 24. 18 in the Eastern Cape, 2 in the Western Cape, 2 in the Northwest, 1 Free State, 1 Northern Cape. It's quite a big number, and we don't know by the end of the season how many more. And we really are calling on traditional leaders in particular, the communities, the parents, to say this cannot go on forever. However, government has come up with a legislation cultural initiation bill which was passed by the National Assembly just now in November, but it still has to go through to the NCOP. At least that law, it's quite strong, has teeth, and it will be able to cap some of the activities that are happening wrongly by those wrong people who are doing wrong things, and will be able to deal with them. Any bogus or illegal schools will be dealt with through that law, where we'll then be able to arrest, even if there's no incident. But why are you opening school? Why are you? We don't know you. Traditional leaders don't know. Government doesn't know. If it's in an urban area, municipality will not be knowing about you. Therefore, minimum sentence 3 years, maximum 5 years. And I think that will then be deterrent from stopping this illegal activity, because most of the deaths are occurring in those illegal initiation schools.
And I suppose one could argue it would be scant comfort for the families who would have lost their children, but at least it is an initiative that shows that government is serious about clamping down here. But if one looks at the number of deaths, Deputy Minister, before I come to Contesa, you have 24, as you've just updated for us now, 24 deaths. And we're still talking about initiates dying through something like dehydration. Why is that?
Well, we did engage traditional leaders at some point to say summer is a difficult period to take children to initiations. But we're then informed and told that there are cultural issues that goes with it, but also there are other weather patterns. In the Eastern Free State, around the Drakensberg mountain, they say it's bitter cold in winter, and therefore children will die naturally of the frost and other things that might be caused by snow and so forth. That is why the Basotho then takes their children to initiation in summer, and then in the Eastern Cape is the Abahluvi and other smaller communities that are doing so. So naturally winter is the best time, because that's when healing takes better, but also dehydration is less in winter. But also we found that those who are running illegal schools, they also do not allow water in the initiation schools, and we've been saying it that water is a necessity for human consumption, because the body needs this particular liquid, because our body is 80% water, and therefore you need to keep on drinking water on rationality rather than no water at all. And I think that's one other thing that is becoming a killer now, particularly in some.
Mr. Zolani Mkiva, I mean, that's a very crucial point. Can you explain for us from Contresa's side, for those of us who don't understand, why would the initiates not be allowed a drink of water I mean, it just seems surreal that someone would die because they're not being allowed to drink water.
Well, let me start off by saying that as Contralesa would like to express regret to what is happening in the country. We think that it's something that can be stopped if we worked together in unison in terms of confronting it. So we also want to say condolences to all the families that are affected with the deaths of these initiates. Something quite that is really regrettable. We think that there has to be a consumption of water by the initiates, but it should be limited. To say it mustn't be used altogether, we think that is totally incorrect. Because scientifically and culturally, we do subscribe to the thought which the Deputy Minister has already expressed, that the body does require the consumption of water in order for it to remain solid and so on. Yeah.
So where is the message being lost here? Because, and it's not the first time, we've been talking for years about dehydration as a cause of many deaths of initiates. Where is the message getting lost? Why is it that at certain schools people believe that initiates should not be given water?
Well, you see, we don't, as Contralesa, we don't want to deal with the symptoms, because to just limit the issue on dehydration, we will lose the problem. Because as you mentioned when you opened up here, there are many causes to these deaths. So what we want to deal with is the causality of the whole problem. We believe that there are too many players into the whole initiation. And there is no one institution that is known to have the overall stewardship. And we are saying as Contralesa, give back that authority to the traditional authorities and let the government come in with the supporting a system. The Department of Cogta, which is represented here by the Deputy Minister, the Department of Health, as well as the South African Police Services, and then the other state institutions like NPA can get involved. Because what we see, what is happening, for instance, we have a problem of bogus schools. That is just one problem. But we also have a problem of NGOs that are funded by Americans, who also come into the space and confuse the situation.
Confuse the situation how?
In the sense that some NGOs, they go to the communities and go through to schools and begin a process of initiating children at a school level. And those children, they don't get accepted by society because they've gone through a way which is not acceptable in the eyes of society. And then they are then taken back traditionally. And when it happens, it then does not happen through a particular process that is overseen by a particular institution. Ideally, in a traditional community, it should be overseen by a traditional authority. So it happens behind the backs of the community. And then all these problems then occur, where children are either killed through being burnt, for instance, others decide to take their lives because they are being tortured. Because the community is not involved. It's more now of an underground exercise, of which it shouldn't be. It should be an open exercise overseen by the community elders who are working under the stewardship of traditional leadership.
Which brings us to the question of how and who polices the initiation schools, Deputy Minister, because it's all good and well to come up with the relevant legislation, but who polices it?
Well, traditional leaders are the custodian of our cultures in South Africa. They are the one that must and ensure, therefore, that these initiation schools in particular are guided, and then through their stewardship, through their leadership, working with communities, but also working with parents, because the parents must get involved too. There are situations where children just disappear from homes, and then children do not know, and then we only discover their children in hospital or when the dead body arrives. And they didn't know, they didn't report, they didn't even do anything. So we are sent to our parents. In the new law, we say, should we find that a parent was negligent, they will also be liable for the death of their children. Because at the point when their child disappears For 3 days, you don't report anything, you don't even bother, and you only want to load the work to traditional leaders. It's irresponsible of the parents themselves. But communities ought to mobilize, communities must unite and really begin to deal with particular issue. But also South Africa is urbanizing. In the urban nodes within traditional leadership, it's becoming very, very difficult for them alone. That's why in the new law, we say municipalities must come working with traditional leaders where they are. However, in the cities like Johannesburg, Tshwane, and so forth, it's quite difficult. However, through Contralesa, we're able to get Izinduna and other people who still believe in the traditional systems, who are now beginning to work with government to see what is it that we can do. And CRL in Gauteng was able to then mobilize everybody, traditional leaders and everybody, to come up with solutions. We might have to look at Eastern Cape, because that's where the big deaths are occurring, and say, Eastern Cape, what else can we do? What else are the issues? Maybe CRLs might then go in and probe the matters and talk to the communities, talk to region. But the law itself is sufficient, and it will be sufficient when it comes into being. However, the mobilization, the education, the awareness, working with regional leaders, I think is one big issue that we ought to do, to also remove the myth that is there within the communities, to say, if children disappear, when we ask them why at the age of 12 do you disappear to the mountain, to the forest, they say it's because other children are taunting me at school. They call me by names, and then I ended up saying, when school closes, I will run and not even tell my parents, and say, wait until you are of age, because it's a
And what age
transition
is
from
that?
boy to man.
What is the legal age?
Well, look, currently the law says 18. But then we were informed, and then I think we are taking care of the issues as the law is being finalized around circumcision can happen at any age. However, initiation then is around 18, because that's where then you are being prepared from being a boy to a man. And anyone who's just going to be turning 18 that year, or who are already 18 years, that's how it should be, because it's about passage right, that we also have to bring in to produce better men who will be responsible in society through the teachings that they get from that particular school.
And you see, and I guess this is where it becomes, slightly problematic. You touched on the issue of parents and punitive measures that will be instituted against parents if their children go missing, etc. But we know that culturally, women are by and large excluded from this process of initiation, as far as taking the initiates and going to perform whatever rituals need to be performed. So in that instance, if a child, as you rightly pointed out, Deputy Minister, sometimes runs away, how do you then blame the parents, knowing that we live in a country where there are many single family-headed households, and most of those are headed by women?
Well,
are you
we
going to
have a
hold them
system of
responsible?
uncles and other men who are there in the family situation. It has never been just the father of the child. The uncles are there, the brothers are there, who themselves might have been from the school. They have to take charge of a particular process. Women are involved from the home state. They're preparing the child, talking to them, obviously. These are their children. When they come back, they also fall in the hands of the women. So therefore, there's nothing that says women are not involved. It's only up to a particular stage, and thereafter the man then takes over whilst the children are going in. And I think we are respecting that environment. The law is not subscribing. We're leaving it to every cultural phenomena, because cultures differ from one era to the other. But definitely women have a role to play in the preparation before the child goes. And they must send these uncles and say, go there because you are from the mountain. Go and check if the child is well. And I think these visitations are very key, they're very fundamental, but in many instances they don't happen because children have just disappeared to the forest or into the mountains.
Mr. Mkiva, I'd like your comment on that as well. And also, do traditional authorities have sufficient capacity to actually police what's going on at these initiation schools?
Thank you very much for that question. That's a very critical question. As Contralesa, we are saying, give back the power to administer initiation to traditional leaders, because it has been taken away. It has been taken away. Give back that power and then capacitate traditional leaders to be able to execute this duty efficiently. At the moment, we can't do that because it's a free-for-all. Cogta is doing its own, health is doing its own. We want this to be coordinated under the stewardship of traditional leadership in order to solve a problem. Because this problem is new. This is a new problem. We didn't have this 26 years ago, 25 years ago. This is a problem of a new dispensation, wherein certain powers of traditional institutions have been taken away. Insofar as this, once a ritual starts killing people, then it ceases to be a credible ritual. This ritual is meant to groom and build future leaders. That's what it is meant to do. It is not meant to kill people. So we are saying as Contralesa, unless we get to the bottom of the problem, which is about creating a scenario in communities where it's a free-for-all, where we cannot certify who is a well-known surgeon, for instance. Some people just wake up the following day because they want to make money, and they decide to be surgeons that conduct circumcision. And we can't deal with that situation because we don't have the power to arrest that situation, because the powers have been eroded. So we think that we ought to get to the bottom of it by ensuring that in communities where this practice is predominantly being practiced, which are communities under the jurisdiction of traditional leaders, give that power to them. We will solve the problem, because then we will register. All the surgeons will be registered. Traditional nurses will be registered. Their schools will be registered. The regulator is the institution of traditional leadership. But don't make it a ceremonial, don't give it a ceremonial role in this picture. Don't give them a ceremonial role. Give them absolute role so that they are able to deal with the problem. Because people go behind the back of the institution. And when we go to these bogus initiation schools, we get attacked. You know, we have rescued more than 50. More than 50 initiates are in hospitals in the last 2 weeks or so. This is the role that we have played. But in certain instances, we are unable to rescue these children because we get beaten up by these cults who attack us when we try to make an intervention.
Well, the government has not taken the establishment initiation. We don't establish. We don't run them. They get established by communities working with regional leaders. We only monitor to ensure that there's compliance, and that's all what we do.
Yeah.
So therefore, the function of the running and the establishment has never been a government, not a single school that you can point that this was established by government.
No, Deputy Minister, the point I'm making is that I am not blaming government. This should not be a blame game.
Yeah.
All what we are saying is that the powers that are taken away from the institution of traditional leadership make it difficult for us to stop people who decide to establish schools, negating the role, the place, and the function of a traditional institution. Because we can't stop them from doing so.
Even in our own jurisdiction.
That's what they do. Some of these deaths are happening there because we have taken away powers from us.
What
do
exactly?
you expect us to do?
Mr. Mkiva,
Yeah.
which powers exactly were you stripped of that you want back from government?
Look, the traditional leaders have been stripped off of the powers, and they are more ceremonial when it comes to these things, because people have got the rights to initiate their own things outside. They are opt-in and opt-out things that people are talking about, wherein it creates this erosion in our communities where people do as they wish and they negate the role and the place of the institution of traditional leadership.
So how do you see the role of government? As you said, you've got Cogta on the one side, you've got the Department of Health on the other side. What role would you like to see them play?
We would like to mainstream the role of the traditional council in the whole equation, because you can pass an act and it can fly above the heads of the people. You must be specific. It must go to the bottom and talks to administration and regulations. It must not just end at a level of an act. It must go to the bottom and talks to administration and the regulations that are at play, which are informed by what is happening at grassroots level. Because if you don't do that, that act, you'll keep on changing it after 5 years when this thing is continuing. How many have we passed? So many.
Deputy
But the
Minister?
death continues.
Well, the legislation is prescriptive. What is the role of the traditional leaders, the traditional councils, in as far as the establishment of the schools and what should not. Definitely that we have covered that particular ground. The issue here is obviously certain powers that are outside of the traditional initiation schools that Mkiva is raising, obviously, which are still a subject of discussions with government, between Contralesa, government, and other traditional leaders in their respective houses. But obviously, we are discussing a package of those powers. But those powers obviously are being engaged within the constitutional framework of a constitutional democracy. South Africa that has decided to be a constitutional democracy itself, but recognizing, obviously, as in Chapter 12 of the Constitution, that traditional leadership are there, they have a role to play, they are custodians of our cultures, but the specific roles and power element is what we're debating now, and obviously that might then result in certain other things happening later. But the law of stopping the deaths is there. Obviously, NCOP still has to go through the process. We're unable to implement it. For now, it's just to work with traditional leaders, Contralesa, and others in their various houses to say this has got to stop. Death, zero death tolerance element should be achieved so that no one goes for cultural practice and comes back dead or injured or any other form.
And I think that's the point, that in certain instances, the two actually do make for very uneasy bedfellows. But coming back to the deaths, and has anyone been arrested? What is the follow-up on these 24 deaths that have occurred? Any arrests, any leads? What's going on?
Well, in the previous 3 years, I think we are beginning to see an increase on arrests because it used not to be even there. 300 people used to die, 100 and something used to die, and there will be zero arrest. And we had to go to the police and NP and say, we need to then begin to come strongly on those people that might have committed acts that has led to the deaths in the initiation schools. And on this one, we are waiting for a report from the Eastern Cape. We've been asking them to say, go and open charges so that the police can move in and arrest. And the slowness of opening cases, it's something that we are worried because parents at the end who are the losers of a child ought to go to the police station and say, he went to that school, he died in that school, so that then police can then come in. Police can only move in when we say it's an illegal school. They will then go close it down together with traditional leaders, move those initiates to a school that is recognized. But at the end, nothing will happen because the law is weak there. Until parents can get an active role in ensuring that they open cases. When your child is kidnapped, also open a case of kidnap. Kidnap law is there in the country. We can just immediately effect and increase the rate of arrest. But without evidence, without anything, you'll arrest and the person gets scot-free. They just get released in many instances because parents are shy and they don't even want to come forward and say, this is what we know. Communities also refuse to come forward.
Mr. Mkiva?
Yeah, we are quite suspicious about what is happening with regards to this whole thing. We think that the intention is actually to kill traditional initiation. And this is something that is connected to commerciality.
Definitely.
We are believing that there are forces at play that want to liquidate this ritual so that then it becomes an opportunity for others to make money. And that is why we are saying that there are many forces at play here.
Who are some of those forces?
The NGOs that I have mentioned that are doing a lot of work, which are funded, heavily funded, to come up with alternative initiation methods, which in the eyes of our communities, those initiatives are not acceptable. So we are saying that we ought to look quite very deeply into this and get to the bottom of it and find the real cause. Ours, we believe that there are dark forces that are at play, and they are using the lives of our people in order to get to a point where they can make money with the whole issue of initiation in the country. We think that our political leaders, they need to wake up and ensure that they work with us, because we've got the leads which we can point them to clearly in our communities, wherein we can see what is happening. We don't want to protect the ritual for the sake of protecting it. This is a good ritual, as I say, but if it starts killing our people, then it becomes problematic. But we don't think that there is a problem with the ritual per se. We think that we are not paying attention to detail in terms of how we do things. And we are not mainstreaming this and giving it to the authority that it belongs to, its custodian, the institution of traditional leadership, wherein government comes in to give the necessary support so that we alleviate completely the issue of death. No one, not a single initiate must die. We went through this ritual. And there was never a problem during our own generation when we went through. Why all of a sudden there are many deaths? Why? That's the question we must ask.
Many questions.
And we believe
still
that there's
need
an
to be
answer
asked.
to this question.
But gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. But thank you so much to Mr. Obed Bapela, who's the Deputy Minister of Cogta, as well as Mr. Zolani Mkiva from the Congress of Traditional Leaders of South Africa, Contesa, for chatting to us this morning about a very serious subject. And as always, we also welcome your comments at Morning Live SABC.